That was a Drake fan, I guess, filing out of the Apollo Theater after his show over the weekend. And oddly, there's an NYPD presence there, one holding a webcam, make sure it's nice and steady to get every face that walked out. He seemed pretty happy and content with his actions there, which made many people go, wait, what? Is the screenshot from that moment when he was glancing up like, yeah, it's me. I'm recording every face that comes out of here. So maybe many people were wondering. This one particular reporter from WABC TV in New York had the cops' explanation. She pointed out that they said the officer depicted in the video is a community affairs officer involved in the 28th Precinct's social media team. Yeah. The officer is taking video for an upcoming Twitter post that will highlight local community events. The video will not be utilized for any other reason. That's what the NYPD said, because there's reason to trust that. Now, by the way, this is on a public street. People are coming out of an event, in a venue. They're not inside. Now they're on the sidewalk. So legally, people get recorded on the sidewalk by the NYPD and a couple of other cops there hanging out and saying that they're doing it so they can post on Twitter and IG and get a couple clicks for it. Who knows? But here's those details. The Drake concert goers would be entitled to legal protection from misuse of footage, like unauthorized commercial usage or certain public broadcasting, but they actually have no legal basis for preventing the cops from capturing that video, which they did, even without their consent, because again, you're in public. But there's that still concern of, we know there's lots of facial recognition things happening with law enforcement, specifically NYPD. We've seen things that people have tested and talked about how this is getting developed. You have cameras out on the corners, and it's just compiling this database of faces. And then, hey, if something happens, say inside that theater, and we need to find out who came out of it, we have that set and ready to go. Why are you against law enforcement? Or they compiled everyone's faces. Would important people in the country like their faces recorded as they walk out of fancy events at the JFK? What was it? I can never remember the name of the venue in New York where all the very rich people go for their big concerts. Is NYPD standing out front with cameras on their faces? Because we just need to collect some faces in case some criminals have walked out. We know they have a history of things like, advanced, let's say, police procedures like stop and frisk. Why would anyone gonna use this fairly? I don't. What are your thoughts, Ben?
Yeah, no, most definitely. And there's so many layers to this. Like the first and foremost, we need to understand something. Police departments have zero respect for elected officials. I just need everybody to fully internalize this, because I remember in my own city of Minneapolis, literally right after police officers murdered George Floyd, during those protests, I remember watching Jeremiah Ellison, elected city council member, standing in between protesters and police officers while the police were literally launching tear gas at the protesters. Okay, so they have zero respect for elected officials. There are even some police departments across the country where the city council said, hey, stop doing minor traffic infractions, just stop it altogether. And the police department basically turned around and said, no, we are gonna keep policing minor traffic infractions, right? And so we need to recognize that fundamentally, police across this country view themselves as above and outside of the law. They view themselves as fully independent from any type of elected leadership, which is so a lesson to people like Joe Biden who keep wanting to increase police budgets. That's what you're asking for, okay? The other is to understand that fundamentally the United States has always been a fascist country, at least in ideology. We are just the most stable form of fascism. We use managerialism, we use bureaucracy and red tape to create pretense, right? Richard Nixon didn't say that he was gonna arrest black and brown folks for no reason. He said that he was gonna crack down on drugs and do the war on drugs and use that as a pretense to jail black and brown folks for no reason. That is fundamentally how the United States has always operated. It's just used more pretense. It's just a far more clever version of what any right-wing authoritarian would do. And so the unfortunate reality is the Democrats buy into this pretense and they say, oh no, it's for a social media post. Our hard-working boys in blue would never lie to us. Even though police, are obviously lying constantly to the point where it's just embarrassing. And so, like, fundamentally, we got to recognize that police officers will systematically under-police white supremacists who are a serious threat to our society, that like commit mass shootings and like, commit like terror attacks and literally sent like bomb threats to children's hospitals because the existence of trans people made them so angry. But then will over-police marginalized communities and anybody they view as a political opponent. I mean, I remember reading a story from a year ago where police officers during like a normal traffic stop called in like a SWAT team to respond to somebody because they had an ACAB bumper sticker, okay? So this is the disproportionate like force that we're seeing from police officers. They are obviously targeting people that they perceive as their political opponents. And so if you're somebody like me, member of a marginalized community, right, as a trans woman, you personally, you have to recognize that police officers, no matter how friendly you are to them, are on some level gonna view you as political opposition, and on some level are gonna be targeting you and harassing you in some way, shape, or form. Whether that be collecting your face, right, for facial recognition, or just random traffic stops and things like that. Because like fundamentally, as the Republicans go more unhinged in terms of like banning, like, passing anti-cross-dressing laws and anti-drag laws and stuff like that, the police are gonna have no issue and no hesitation in enforcing those laws to the extreme degree.
A big assist in this whole thing about, you mentioned the pretense of fascism and the way things get set up a lot of times, is also that divisive nature. Making sure that those folks, those marginalized communities, those folks that we're gonna allow and say the boys in blue, those honest boys in blue are going after the bad guys. The reason they say that, and the reason why we set that whole thing up that way, is to have the general society have this negative energy. As much as they can, at least. It's hard, it's getting hard to push back on, or harder for them to push this narrative because we have visual evidence of the way things are going. But it's to make sure enough people go, well, we don't really trust them, right? It's okay if this type of surveillance or this type of approach to policing happens, because you know how those people are. It poisons the mindset of so many people, and that's again back to the beginnings of this country, because there's always a hierarchy in our society.